Today we've got over and unders, side-by-sides, hammer guns, a cape gun, a submachine gun, and a few other pretty cool things to share with you, from niche makers to extremely good purchases. Guys, welcome to the Holts Sealed Bid November 2025. Even after 6 years of coming up to Holts, there's always something new and exciting that you haven't seen, and certainly that we haven't shared with you before. This is something along those lines. This is lot 6505A for a circa £300. Not a super expensive 20-bore hammer gun. On the face of it, this is a classic Victorian hammer gun, but what's really quite interesting is that this gun was built 1915 by Charles Osborne in Birmingham. By 1915, hammer guns were out, and so that adds a little intrigue to the story. Before we get into that, let's have a little look over what we actually have here. The overall weight on this gun is 5 pounds 10 ounces, a proper nimble, lovely little thing. It's got a 13 5/8 inch stock, so it is small, but 20 bores back in that era were not for big men, and stocks were shorter generally anyway. The barrels are 28 inch blued, nitro proofed with 2.5 inch chambers, which is not something to be scared of, particularly given that 2.5 inch 20 bore shells are still very, very available, certainly in the UK. It's not just the stock on this gun that dictates that it was probably made for someone smaller. The trigger guard is scaled down, as are the triggers. You're not going to want to have too sausagey a paw to be able to fit your finger through and onto that second trigger. The front trigger is ever so slightly articulated or has a touch of movement to it, and so you would struggle, even with my dainty hands, to get your finger on that back trigger and pull it. So this gun was clearly designed for someone a little bit smaller. You've got carved percussion fences. By that I mean you have this carving and in depth around the nipple here. This originally was for when they had percussion caps to protect the shooter. If you had exposed nipples with exposed percussion caps, when you shot it, there could be debris that came back in your face. This creates a bit of a shield around the face ejecting side of debris, and so it's a bit of a harking back to that era. So I see one of two things has happened with this gun and why it was made in 1915. We established in the main sale with Simon that not all guns with a date were made on that date. Not the action may have not been made then, may have been made before, could have been finished well after. That's just the date that it was proofed or the serial number was put into a ledger. 1915 could dictate that this was an old action they had lying around that they finished up for somebody who just needed this gun, and seeing as Charles Osborne had been making guns since the time that this particular, more Victorian type of gun was fashionable, maybe it was just finished in the Edwardian era. The alternative is some old boy decided that he knew exactly what he wanted for one of his family members, what he started with, or maybe what he wanted to finish his career with, a smaller bloke. And this is what he went in and said, I don't want any of your newfangled box lock ejector trash, I want something classic and classy. I guess my real thing with that is that if you're going to commission something like this, maybe you'd have it engraved. And this gun, in a more typically trade gun fashion, has zero engraving other than the maker's name on the side, the maker being Charles Osborne, a Birmingham gun maker of some prestige. Charles Osborne made great working guns, well known for intricate lockwork, great quality, outsourced a lot, or made a lot of outsourced guns or white label guns for other people, made parts for the London gun trade, very well documented as a great gun making house. But they did make some fine guns. Part of my thoughts with this is perhaps it was just made of old stock or was lying around for some time, or was just made as a cheapie, yes, we've got that lying around, sir, I'll make you a gun for your daughter, this is what I can do, this is what we've had lying around for 50 years. Either way, it's in lovely condition. It's had a little bit of light refurb, but nothing too atrocious. The gun locks up relatively well. Worth requesting a condition report on the barrels, but they don't look in terrible condition. Some light pitting for sure, and a little bit of the left this end tube. All in all, just a great little sporting sausage. The barrels ring okay, nothing too exciting there, but it's in good enough order all in all. The action's good and tight and it hasn't seen a great deal of work. For the price point, if you're after a gun of this kind of ilk, it's a really nice thing. Just bear in mind that trigger guard is small, but the history is fascinating. The potential history is fascinating. I guess we'll never know. But it's got a top lever, not anything awkward to open it with. It's got rebounding locks, so you're not having to worry about half cocking your locks to reopen it. Just a cool piece of history and a lovely walked up gun. Just imagine actually having a bit of fun with this, if you grew the stock a little. Next up is something a little bit bigger, the Keeman KM4. I am a bit of a fan of these Keeman KM4s. I think they represent great value for money and they've got great competition pedigree, great Spanish pedigree. And if you pick the right one, they are really nice to shoot. This particular one, which is lot 6275, is up for I think around the £1,000 mark. Not a huge amount of money for a very handmade, hand-finished gun. Let's talk you through what we've got with this one and then we'll dive a little bit more into the model and the maker's history. So the stock in total is 14 5/8 with a pretty horrifically fitted pad. It's a shame, but I think with a little bit of work you could have that fitted. That's really neither here nor there, but I guess it's a sign that this person just wanted practicality, which is kind of the standard second-hand KM4 buyer. They want a gun that shoots and they're not too fussed about much else, from my experience of selling them. Wood is very pretty, oil finished, it's got a few scuffs and marks, but this gun was built in 2000, so it makes it 25 years old. That's about 10 years into Keeman's tenure, being started in 1990. Pistol grip, no palm swell, but it is a very full pistol grip, and it's got plenty of carving in the top end here, so it actually fits quite nice. It'd be nice to see a little palm swell, but you know, in 2000 that wasn't quite the rage that it is now with sporting guns. Got the safety on top here, which has been put into a locked off position, so probably a dedicated trap shot. Nobody who used this for game shooting in that instance. Again, no real drama there, just bear that in mind. You could probably have that reversed, but without going inside to see how it's done, can't really guarantee that. The KM4 is a clay gun, right? So no drama there. The gun has got a slight semi-beaver tail forend here, which is, I've always been a fan of this profile, very similar to a lot of modern sporting guns and most of the sporting guns of the day of any sort of quality and pedigree, I guess. Take the action off there and you'll see that this gun has a Boss locking system. Pretty smart, right? Pretty reminiscent of the Parazzis of the era, which was kind of the vibe of this gun. That is referred to regularly by people known as the Spanish version of a Parazzi. They got a little bit more of a Spanish charm to them than an Italian one, and those who are into Spanish guns will know what I mean. It's just a different way of building guns and a different gun making heritage. 32-inch barrels with a flat tapered rib, looks like a 10-7 with the standard white bead on the front there. Nice. No, again, no real complaints, just a good timeless thing. I appreciate things have moved on a little bit, but not a great deal. This of its era was one of the best, and most of the other guns have now caught up, even in the sort of the lower grades. So if you're going to go and buy one of these new now, it's going to set you back well over 10 grand, which is why this offers such good value for money. The barrels aren't steel proofed. They weigh 1,607 grams and they're proofed at 18.7 bores, so they're slightly overboard. Keeman triggers are lovely. I've had a few friends with KM4s. I had one come through my hands briefly. I thought about buying it, but I didn't need another 8.5 pound over and under at the time, but I did use it for a bit to see whether I really needed another 8.5 pound over and under at the time. And this one, being no different, weighs 8 pounds 10. They are a big gun, sort of more of a trap heritage, but the Brits took them and we adapted them to sporting clays. Digweed was well known for shooting them to a very high standard, and I know a few shots now who shoot them to a very high standard. Again, for the price you can pick these up second hand, you can have a demon of a sporting gun, and spares are still available, so that's kind of nice. Balance is straight over the hinge, exactly as you'd expect from a gun like this. Whether that's to do with a slightly larger pad and whether it was designed to be slightly more front heavy, we'll never know. The front has been multi-choked. It looks like it was done by Briley, just looking at those notches. But yeah, I mean, and this one's not done a great deal, or it's been rebuilt to a good standard. And some of these you'll find, like any sporting gun that's 25 years old, if someone's rattled 20,000, 30,000 shells, or even 10,000 shells a year through it, that's 250,000 shells. At some point you'd need that gun to be rebuilt. I love the way these actions are. Simple, black, Keeman KM4 on one side here, and that slight sort of bevel around the half side plate. It's nice. As I said earlier, Keeman was founded in 1990. We actually went there a couple of years ago for a little bit of a factory tour as part of the Spanish Gunmakers Tour, and that's very much worth a watch if you're interested in that kind of thing. It's a smaller family operation, but they stayed deliberately that way. They're a very quietly understated maker of premium guns, and they're still producing guns today. The KM4 is their dual gun. It's a competition gun designed to handle a little bit more like a game gun. You have all those competition hallmarks, a slightly raised rib over the barrels here. It may only be a few mil, but it does raise your eyes ever so slightly above the top lever, and they actually give you a better sighting plane, which is something that we see makers still striving to do today to better and better standards. You have little touches of hand finishing that you might not get on certain Italian guns. A hand checkering on the top lever, hand checkering on the stock here. Nice little touches, which in 2000 would have cost you an awful lot of money, and today will still cost you a lot of money, which is why I think this does, as I've said for the 15th time, represent good value for money. In the era, we were seeing sporting clays and VTAS becoming bigger and bigger, and people moving away from the traditional trap and skeet shoots. And this format of gun was really coming alive from about 1990 onwards. Lively handling heavy guns. People have been modifying trap guns for 2 decades to get them better for sporting clays and VTAS. And now it was sort of, not the pinnacle, but this was at the height of its time. Weighty, but you can drive these things and shoot them like they're a 7.5 pound gun, not an 8 pound 10 gun. Keeman made plenty of other models, but this is the one you'll see most often. You'll see KM6s, KM2s, KM all sorts, and you can still buy them new today in all manner of variants. But I really think they're worth a look secondhand. They come up somewhat often, and they'll vary in price quite a lot. Usually you're into about 2.5, 3 grand for one of good order, and the spec on this is exactly what I would choose if I was after a KM4. I like it. There you go. 62.75. Let's go back in time a bit. This one is spicy. I've always had a soft spot for Cape guns, and this is a really cool example of one. This is lot 5285. It's 400 to 600 pounds. It is a Section 1 firearm, non-obsolete caliber, 16 gauge Cape rifle. One of these is for shot, and the other is rifled for ball. Though you can fire slugs out of both, I believe you can even fire shot out of this rifle barrel if you need to. The purpose of this gun in 1975 was to have, given that nitro powder didn't exist and most big game was shot with big bullets fired with black powder, is that a 16 gauge ball was not as good, but quite comparable to a lot of the big game guns of the day. And if you were going off into the bush for a month on safari and you took one gun with you, something like this wouldn't have been far out. This is a S.W. Barnsley of Grahamstown in the Cape Colony. Probably a relative of T. Barnsley, is a gunmaker I've come across before out there as well. Again, unlikely to have made the guns, but likely to have bought guns in and have them named up, given that it would have been probably cheaper to have them made in Birmingham, or even in part and have them finished down there. I love the patch box in the back, so you can keep all your stuff in there to keep it clean. An engraving of a lion. Unlike a lot of the engraving of the day, I'm fairly sure this person had seen a lion, which is kind of smart. You have brass strengthening pieces around the wrist and a little crack here. This is a hunter's gun in Africa at a more perilous time. It's not like getting on a plane and getting your vaccines and your pills and knowing you're going to be okay. That was a scary time to be out there. And you needed a gun like this to be by your side in case things got gnarly when you were, you couldn't call an air evac helicopter or plane to get you out of the bush. You were going to die. Interestingly, I believe this nipple has snapped off, but we actually look at this nipple here. But yeah, I've not seen one with a hex top like that, or at least I can't recall that I have. Oh, what I would give for it to be convenient to take this out to Africa and just go and hunt with it, carry it in the bush once again. But I love it. The metal pistol grip, I love the wood stock, I love the stories behind this gun. Is that sighted to 600 yards? Yeah, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 sight is missing, and 600 yards flip up. Yeah, look at this, a 600-yard flip up sight. I don't know what you're shooting at that. I mean, maybe you'd hit a house at 600 yards with this rifle. We're going to see it 600 yards with a 16-bore ball. I don't know enough about the ballistics of 16-bore ball. It can't be like super special. Well, maybe it is. I literally have no idea. Look, I think there's an interesting thing to be said for the sealed bit. You'll find some incredible cool stuff. And always challenge yourself to learn more. Sealed bit always delivers. There's people who've used guns for life. Those guns come to the sealed bit. Stuff like this is cool. So this one takes us back to 1897 in France. Lot 6723 is circa 500 pounds and is a Guyot of Paris. Guyot is a underknown maker, that's the wrong word, under-recognized maker in the UK. They were known as the Purdy of Paris, a very fine gun. Certainly pre-World War I, they were producing incredible guns. Their gun-making approach came a little differently to other makers of French origin at the time, aka Garn and Fusil Robust, who both made top quality guns, but were perhaps less pragmatic with the quality from a user perspective. This maker was inspired by the great gun makers of the era. They were British. And so what they did is they looked at British actions and British action design, took the best concepts, reliability, ease of use, ease of opening, ease of operation, handling, all the good stuff, and then applied French flair. And the French flair on this is evident. Beautiful scroll engraving, very pretty side plates, we'll get into that in a second, and extremely nice fences, drop points, beautifully sculpted grip, just a well-proportioned, good-looking gun with a raised, scalloped rib. Let's go through the good and bad of the gun. The barrels are full and cylinder, 29¼ inch. Good, very usable combination for most people in reality. The chambers are 2½ inch. That's good or bad. Certainly there are 2½ inch shells for 12 bore more available than that 20 bore we saw earlier. I would say that it would be beneficial if it was 70mm, but it's not. It's 2½ inch. And that's okay. You're just gonna have to get over it if you like this gun, I guess, and many of us do. You just find a way. It's not even a handicap in the UK, so I'm really talking to the American viewers there. The action itself is not a side lock. It is a side-plated box lock. Side plate versus box lock is a film we made a while ago and it's worth a watch for a bit of a deep dive, but the quick rundown is this. Side locks have a lock on the side of the action where all of the working mechanisms are housed. That means there is more parts, smaller parts, more refined. You can end up with generally better trigger pulls because you're working it slightly differently. It's a more complicated gun to build and it gives you a bigger canvas to engrave. It was the highest standard and maintained its place as such, purely based off of prestige and the time it takes to make them. The box lock, all of the working parts are contained inside the actual box here of the action. Less parts, bigger parts, more robust. Better, in fact, in many ways, but always branded by the guys who made side locks as the cheaper cousin, the less refined cousin. And so, you know, it was less popular. But Guyot, being an intelligent old bunch of gun makers, thought, hey, let's hybridize the two. And they weren't the first to do it by far, but they were one of the people to do it. And it's an impressive thing, and it does look uncannily like a sidelock in its proportion. What it allows you to do is base the sidelock profile and symmetry off of look rather than how do we fit these parts off there. It gives you a pinless look with a single screw in the side rather than the pins of the sidelock coming off, plus all that robustness from a box lock. I don't think there's any skin in the game to say that it's not a real side plate. This is a 130-year-old gun. It gets a break. If it was a thing back then, that means it's tradition today, and so you can't dog on it. I'm going to go with good. Hidden third bite. Double lock up with a hidden third bite that goes into the back of the action just there, and this little lock. That gives you more locking surface. Good. Robustness is good. We like robustness. It does have a heap of proof marks, nitro proof marks included, and it is bored at 736. Looks like a reproof at 736. So potentially being re-lapped out or redone at some point. All in all, the barrels don't look terrible. Really not dinged or bashed around a lot. I quite like it. I love this raised scalloped rib. I think that's a really nice touch. Just gives you a pretty classic but clean sighting plane. That's good. The real bad comes at the back here with the stock. Because there's only about a half of one at 13 3/4 length of pull. But the wood is lovely, it is original, the checkering is lovely. I love these subtle drop points at the back here. The safety catch is good and clean. Everything about this gun is lovely. If it had a 15-inch stock, it would be in the main sale all day long. And I presume there may be something to it with quality or thickness of barrels that means it's in the sealed bid, but that's part of the course. That's for you to dig deeper into. Final touch, you got the monogram on the forend there. That's nice. It's just classy. I've seen now half a dozen Goyos. They're classy. At £6.14, it is lightweight given the barrel length. Not a bad thing. I expect once you extended the stock, you'd add that weight back up to get it into the low £7 mark, which is exactly where a gun like this should be. Designed for walking around, enjoying yourself, or even stood on peg, just having a nice day. There's a few lovely touches on here, the way that stock flows up into the action and gives you sort of a two-stage thing. It's a beautiful girl, and Goyo really did know how to take a relatively boring action and carve it to make it look good. It's not conventionally British looking, no. But that's because it's French. And they do know how to make guns too, it pains me to say, because we've got another one to look at later that's pretty nice. For now, that's that. The Purdy of Paris. What do you think? I do love the main sale at Holts. It's full of some of the best guns in the world. But I really do come alive whilst rummaging through less valuable, weirdy guns in the sealed bid, and this could be the winner of the sale for vague interest and gun geekery for me. I'll admit, for a gun that is valued at 80 to 120, I spent far too long researching it and going deep into it. And that's because I've seen these before, but not that looked like this. This is an IGI Domino. Before I get deep into the weeds with a gun that nobody should care about, but you should probably know a little bit about, let's go over the basics of what we have here. Lot 6300 is valued, as I said, not a lot of money. It's got 29 3/4 inch fixed choke barrels with 3/4 at improved mod and full choking. It's got a 14 3/4 inch stock with a ventilated pad and a black spacer. It's got lacquer finished wood in a relatively low grade, but not ugly. It has hand skip checkering over a palm swelled, long drawn pistol grip. It has a manual safety, I believe. It has a locking cross top bite and 2 bottom drawers that soak into the bottom of the action there. It has a parallel tramline rib, not unlike the Brownings of the era. This was born in 1980, and it has this rather remarkable beaver tail forend with scallops and 4 eyelets cut into it for venting heat. Finally, it's got a selectable trigger at the rear of the unit there, not unlike some gun makers still use today. I think at this point you'll start to understand why I was fascinated by this gun, because it looks like a gun worth much more than 80 to 120. When I say that, what I mean is we've got a scroll back action, relatively nicely fitted and finished wood. Skip checkering. Nice looking engraving, even though it's probably just etched in there, but it was done to a nice standard originally designed by ICAM. The forend took work. And this gun just looks like it's worth more from the pictures. When you pick it up and feel it, you start to get a slightly better picture, which is why it's important sometimes to get hands on. It opens and closes, I mean, better than the price, and the trigger pulls are meh. But the overall spec is good. It weighs in at just over 8 pounds, it's got the tramline rib. This would be a great starter gun for anybody looking to get a heavyweight sporter to add to their collection, even though it's a trap gun, of course. But as I said, many of our sporters now look like trap guns from the 80s. Not dissimilar to this. So let's get into it. Who was IGI and what was the Domino? My confusion came because I have seen Dominoes before. Not the pizza place. That name on a gun that looked nothing like this. So IGI is where we'll start. IGI stands for Industria Granelli Italiana. They were a marketing brand firm. They never really built any guns themselves. They used outsourced gun parts, engravers, barrel tubes, had them stuck together by other people, maybe finished in-house, we don't know. Their records aren't public and certainly don't seem to exist. I went deep into Italian gun forums to try and find any more, and it kind of reaches a bit of a dead end because most of these guns were built for a semi-export market. At the time, this was priced between a 686 and a Parazzi. And so it was marketed as a more expensive version, at least this model. They had guns built by Rizzini, parts built by Marocci, parts built by Zoli, and parts built by pretty much anyone in the valley. But that's why we see so many different types. This is what is referred to as the SKB style. There's a Rizzini block style, there's a high rib style, and then there is a more classic Brescia style. And by classic Brescia, I mean the old cheap one with the crossbolt that is made of butter. This particular one is noted as one of the better IGI Dominoes. Domino was the gun brand, if you like, of IGI built for export. They were a business-to-business transactor, never really sold direct-to-consumer. And yeah, I just think this is a great piece of history. A gun maker that went out and said, what do people want? They want a gun that looks great for reasonable money, and so this is what they produced in the 80s. And it's got all those historical hallmarks. We look at those in other guns of 100 years ago, but, you know, 1980 is not a short period of time ago, and things have changed. Skip checkering wouldn't particularly pass today. This venting is sort of threefold. Aesthetically, it's something. It will aid in barrel cooling, probably minimally, but somewhat. But it was really a flashy marketing signal, right? This gun is fast, this gun is racy, this gun means business. We are making sure your barrel's cool so you can defeat your competitors. It's the same as sticking pink bits all over an A400. It's a domination move to have that on your gun. And I honestly like it. It's cool. It's very 1980s Italian, and I can get behind it. I love the fact that selector's on the bottom, just a little bit different. Again, not something we've never seen before, but I really love the ease with which it can be twiddled. I'm sure that would probably pee you off if you knocked it moving into the trigger position, but you know, at least they were trying something different, and it gives you a really nice safety catch on the front there. Honestly, I think for the money, somebody needs to buy this and just treasure it and enjoy it and go and shoot some clays with it and enjoy a really good looking 1980s gun. So many guns haven't changed. So many guns were built vanilla to last like forever and just look perennially good, and that's okay. But this is like a Scirocco. Like, it still looks good today, but it is clearly of the era. I may well go for a cheeky one on it, but I expect you will too, so we'll see how that pans out. IGI no longer exists. It was born in the early to mid 70s. I think this is like a 1980 gun, 1979, 1980 gun. And they seem to fizzle out, although there is no exact date, because obviously guns were probably left on shelves in the late 90s. Up to about 2000 is when I can find dates of them still available, or people saying they purchased a new one. From forums of people who've had these for some time, depends on the model. But most people seem to say that because they outsourced and because they were putting their name on it, they made sure these things were to a standard. Why IGI stopped producing, I guess we'll never know. There's no solid evidence, but we can presume certain things. One, that if you started making guns and it was a family firm in the 70s, by the late 90s, you've probably had enough. The market was also changing in the 90s. We see some big Italian firms who were building fantastic guns in the 80s, remember the Franchi Barrage, not be able to stand up to harsh economic climates in the late 80s and early 90s, and changing marketing, changing brands, and changing globalism. I think the reality is the consumer changed from being able to just pop into a shop and buy what they were told to be able to get magazines easier. The flow of information was starting to become bigger. Inherently, what I'm saying is you would buy more trusted brands. Berettas, Brownings, Marukus in the 90s, some Winchesters were the thing to have. And spending more than one of those things on a lesser known, lesser trusted brand was not viewed as intelligent. You probably didn't have the social license here in the UK at least. And seeing as this was a gun built mainly for export, there you go. Our next one is for those of you who have ever misplaced a gun, which hopefully isn't many. This is the Lamba Never Lose, painted in 1978. That's a fib. This is a customized Lamba. 80 to 120 will buy you 6154, 1978 built Lamba, sprayed up by hand in a wonderful, inspiring, and yet mildly inconspicuous yellow, as it's put in the catalogue. Look, Lambas are what they are. They really held the market as first gun. They were affordable, semi-robust, well-spec'd Spanish guns, and you would never be looked down on for having one. Nowadays, they stopped making guns some time ago when they went bust, but nowadays they really have fallen out of that era of grace in favour of Turkey. Turkey kind of took their place as the affordable, semi-well-spec'd gun. These were built a little bit better. But they are a user's gun. Spare parts are now becoming hard to find, and from a collectible point of view, they're in sort of like coprolite variety. Some people are into them, most people don't value them. Hey look, if you would like to get a loaner gun for someone, I can imagine way worse than putting this in somebody's hands when they want to come shooting. We've all been in that position, right, where you take a friend out shooting for the first time, and that you would lend them your spare gun, and they come with you for a while, and they don't apply for a license, and they don't get their own gun. This would hurry them up a bit, wouldn't it?
How did you find the stuff when I miss it?
I spent far too long on the Holts website.
This is an interesting old beast. Well, 7121 is a John Paxton. Paxton is a Southampton gunmaker, which is coincidentally where I live. Later, Paxton & Cox, and unfortunately doesn't exist today, but I've had a few of their guns through my hands. This is a nice old girl, to be fair. What's quite interesting is you've got pins that run the full length of the stock right there. You literally just clicked in my brain what they are. They're tacks, probably from a leather cover, and they would have put some horsehair underneath, and that would have been like a cheek razor / recoil reducer. You can see all those pieces come all the way in the back, and that would have just been stretched over the horsehair. And then strange that we've got these 3 notches in the top. It's a real interesting thing. I've been reading a lot about Southampton history recently. I had a few people ask when we've been on our travels this year of like, what's Southampton like? And the answer is it's a glorious dump. It's better than Portsmouth, for what it's worth, of course, so that's something. But it was once a great city, you know. Supermarine was based out of there. Loads of planes, loads of boats, loads of money. The Titanic sailed from there because it was the port, the place. Legendarily beautiful high street. And then, in 1940, on the 30th of December and 30th of November and 1st of December, the Germans came for 6 hours a night, from 6 p.m. till midnight both nights, and dropped 1,500 bombs and 5,000 incendiaries, and basically flattened the place. Killed a few hundred people, which was very sad, but destroyed, 3,000 homes and damaged 8,000 in total, including most of the actual interesting ancient part of town. And now you go there, and Southampton's not very nice anymore. They spent all the money rebuilding London. Either way, I saw this gun and I was like, I wonder how beautiful Southampton was when this gun was ordered. How happening it was, how cool it was, how bustling it was as one of the major port cities of Europe, let alone England. This is lot 6103, a gun that on specification alone I have no place talking about positively. It is French, made by Maisonneuve. It is built in 1950, not one of the best era of gun making. It is a 16 gauge, far from one of my preference calibers. It's double trigger, and I believe it's non-ejector. All things that shouldn't be interesting. But when I saw a picture of it, I thought actually the carving and the lines and the general shape and specification of this gun were worth digging into. First off, I'd never heard of Maisonneuve, and so I got to geek out once again. A little less information for sure, but enough out there. And then I picked it up, and I really liked the quality of the work. I loved the action carving, and I thought the whole thing was built to be practical and from a different standpoint and point of view than the British makers of the time, and as such, I really thought that it took me a while to really appreciate German guns. Maybe this is the time in my life that I need to learn to appreciate French guns. And so, I'm trying. Starting at the back, we have an inch kick ease pad. That brings our stock length overall up to 14 3/4. No drama there. Lovely hand-oiled finish on some classic walnut. Nothing, again, too flashy, just a good utilitarian piece of walnut. Swept back Prince of Wales with a rounded knob. I actually don't mind a round knob in this context, and it suits the gun. The gun has flowing lines. Hand checkered, and a lovely form to this comb. Comes to a lovely point on the front. It's hard to see from your angle, but from the top down you can see there's a lot of drop at the heel, but it's quite high at the front. And although this stock is 14 3/4, it brings my head into about the right place when it's at the front. You don't see stock designs on English guns like this, really, certainly in the 1950s, not since the era of hammer guns when we shot a lot of walked up game. A driven game gun and a walked up game gun and a clay gun all desire different types of stock design. This is designed to mount quickly, not have to drop your head in. Your head can stay in a relatively similar place. The stock hits your shoulder, the gun hits your face, and you pull the trigger. It's not a bad stock design for a walked up gun, that's for sure. The engraving is hand done, not to an insane standard, but it is lovely. It's nicely done. Of a duck on one side and half a tree, and a pheasant on the other side, and half a tree. I guess they had to fill the space with something, and it's not bad. All done by a bit of scroll work as a border. Lovely little vignettes, classic, classy, not too much nor too little. The action draws up on a bite through the bottom there, or a lump through the bottom, and two locking grips in the back there, a bit of a treble grip. Non-ejector with one ejector side there, and that deep scalloped monoblock that we've seen on many Continental guns. The forend is a three-piece forend, engraved screw heads here, and you can see beautifully fitted and finished. And the final finish here that we're going to look at is on top of the action. We have a tapered rib, 7mm to 4mm with a brass bead sight, and at the back we actually have a scalloped rear V sight. You see this now sometimes on, I think, is it Rizzini who make one, with a scalloped back end to act as a rear sight for woodcock shooting, so that in a pinch when you slam that gun to your shoulder to take a shot in the thick brush, you know that this, as long as the bead's between here, you're going to be able right. A very different, more reactive design of gun, designed for quick, reactive pot hunting rather than more formal driven shooting. The beauty of looking at guns with different action designs rather than just the tried and tested is you spot new things, and the French were never scared of new designs and concepts. On the top of the action here you have actually this whole metal plate is a separate piece, a cover for the top lever cam. I have almost no idea what's underneath or how to take it off, but I do love the idea and kind of want to dig inside and find out. I guess it's going to cost me £250 to £350 to find out. Maisonneuve was a Saint Etienne gun maker, founded by Jean-Aimé Maisonneuve, who was born just before the turn of the century. They petered out in the 60s and 70s, and you can see their guns all over. After the war, there was a demand for labour. People were worth more money because there were less of them. Western Europe was rebuilding after a pretty vicious war. And gun makers were just in short supply. If you were making a few guns, not for a high price, you could not afford to pay your staff what people were being paid in other walks of life. And so finding gun makers as a small gun maker of more affordable guns was difficult. Ergo, so many of them just shut down. A little bit like the other. Maisonneuve at this point in the 60s and 70s would have been in his 60s and 70s and probably was ready to retire. And given that nobody was willing to take on that name, or no one did take on that name, they died out. It's my first encounter with one. I appreciate the gun making. One final note, and if we take this apart, which does come apart absolutely lovely, is that on the barrels we have choke rectifie et couillard portée garantie, which basically means that these barrels were made by someone else, also stamped JB. The JB probably standing for Jean Boyer, that's probably a graphic mispronunciation, who was a barrel maker. The French, much like the British and the rest of Europe, when you were a smaller maker, you couldn't make it all yourself. And a little bit like some gun makers now, you buy in the bits you can't make yourself, because when there's someone making high quality barrels, buy it from them. If there's a great engraver, get them to do it. These things are sensible. So the barrels for this gun were likely made by Jean, and the chokes were done by Couillard, who were a great barrel regulator, and portier guarantee means range guaranteed. So I guess it's like sending your gun to Teagues back in the 50s. One thing about this action is it's got a very French look to it. There is a possibility that the action wasn't even made by him, and maybe he bought them in from Fusil Robust, who made that sweatback top there. I think it could be. But I guess we'll never know. Like many of these makers, the knowledge of what they were is mainly lost, mostly in different languages, and varied in source. So much comes from third-hand information, word of mouth from someone who knew someone who worked there, or someone who knew someone who bought one originally, that it's always hard to track. But I really do think that's quite a fun game to do. There we go. The French do know how to make an interesting gun. We don't look at these very often, but we really should. This is a deactivated gun, meaning you could buy it without a license and own a really cool piece of history. This is the iconic PPSH. Stalin's typewriter, what's it, 900 rounds a minute? Somewhat reliable, extremely cheap to reproduce, extremely Russian. The drum mag was particularly unpopular, stick mag was significantly more popular. Again, you can carry more of them, they're more reliable. Plus, I would have thought by the time you dumped that, if it can fire 900 rounds a minute, you probably want to stop and let it cool down, change your mags. I just stopped for a tea break and I walked back into the sealed bid room for another rummage. There are a lot of guns in there, so it's pretty easy to miss ones, even spending hours on the website and going through the room yourself. But sometimes things do jump out at you, and lot 6803 was one of them. It is a Lucio Loyola. Looking at the catalogue, I then saw this was £70 to £90, and I thought, you know what, this is a proper bargain alert territory. There's a lot about this gun that I like for not a lot of money. Side-by-sides are an interesting thing. You hear all manner of things about them. The market's dead, they're all going abroad, but I also know lots of my friends and peers are buying side-by-sides and enjoying them in the field, enjoying them in their collections. They are just a nice thing to behold and use. I also know that times are tough out there, so spending loads of money on a side-by-side you may never use or may use periodically. I say may never use, of course you use it, but not like your day-to-day. It is scary. A little bit like buying your first of anything. Some people are anal, will research and then invest well. Other people need to scratch the itch first before committing. How many times we all started new sports, new hobbies, new things, and ended up with lots of stuff that you shouldn't have spent lots of money on. And so I thought, you know what, if you want a side-by-side, of which many of you are over and under and semi-automatic users, for the majority, a little bit like me, and you are wanting to foray into a side-by-side that has a lot of good stuff about it, this is the one, lot 6803, a Lucio Loyola. It's a 30-inch barrel with a raised, tapered rib, a swept semi-pistol grip, and a reasonable 14 and something inch stock. The action is case color hardened. It retains lots of its original case color hardened from 1964. And I know what I said earlier about 1960s and 70s not being good for gun making, but that really is in certain places. Historically speaking, that's when the Spanish really started to kick off. They were not in such a good place economically as other countries, or in a different place economically to other countries. They still had reasonably priced labor. And so they could still build handmade guns that would satisfy the itches and urges of nations whose gun makers were struggling to make affordable guns because of the economic climate. This is about when this is kicking off properly. And so we see an awful lot of cool stuff going on here, a lot of gun for the money. Yeah, the quality of the metalwork isn't super guaranteed, but it's fair to say the Spanish never made anything too bad in their side-lock side-by-side department. It's mostly okay. So you've got a deep acanthus scroll a la Holland and Holland-esque look to it. Side clipped, pistol grip, top rib. This is a competition spec gun. Loyola was known for making both game guns and competition grade guns, and competition back then was trap and live bird shooting. This is the Ibor premium grade model. This is the best they could do. There's a lot about this that is worthy of buying, the spec especially. And then actually playing with it and using it, it's well put together. Like, it's definitely a cheaper Spanish gun from the 60s. We're not talking about perfect lines, perfect finish, and perfect attention to detail. But the way it fits, opens and closes, this is a well enough made gun. And more importantly, it looks like it's fired about 3 boxes of shells in the last many years, 60 years. 70mm chambers with some choke in each. What was that 17.5 over 18.4 and 8 over 18.4. I can't do choke in metric, sadly. That's all I have to say really, is go check it out. If you want a side by side, this is a great option. I really like it. What a great base for a project. And by that I mean, knock off the horrible plastic grip cap, that aged badly. Maybe have something a little bit nicer put on there, or just a little piece of horn or something. Have the stock refinished, not aggressively, but just have it, put an oil finish on there, that will darken it nicely. Have a pad put on the back just to make it a little bit more fitted maybe if you're a bit taller, or leave it as it is. But let's be honest, we're going to be shooting steel loads at some point soon. Let's not beat around the bush that you're going to need a little bit more bang to get those pellets up there, and so a little bit of recoil softening on the back would be nice. But honestly, the grip, the way it shoots, the way it holds, the sight picture, you'd have to spend a lot more money to get something significantly worse. Bargain of the sale. Certainly the bargain of the sale that I've found so far. Let's continue looking. Jim.
Sonny.
I've brought you a case of guns that I saw on the website. And
Okay.
I thought they were interesting, so I thought we could go through them together whilst you're on lunch break.
Absolutely.
We have a pair of 1935 and 1937 William Ford box lock ejectors.
But it says William Evans in the case.
Yeah, well,
They fit
you
it.
can't be picky for under $1,000.
No. All right.
Let's have a look, I
Yeah.
guess, and see what we think of whether they're actually worth the money. Because a matched pair of guns is a fine thing, a rare thing, and historically was out of reach of many people. But I saw these and thought, that can't be that bad. On the face of it, a lot of original colour.
Yeah.
Like they've been sat up a long time, but they've not been looked after whilst they've been sat up. I think that's what it smells like to me.
I mean, this one is all right. It could use some TLC, obviously. It's been refinished quite a few times. Obviously, the wood is quite below the metal.
When we look at this one by
you've
comparison.
got a lot of colour. I don't. So I got the ugly one.
You did get the ugly one.
Okay.
Okay. So the big question is, at £1,000, are they a good buy? Because there's nothing super special about it, right? William Ford made some of the greatest barrels of his era, was known to outsource stuff to other parts of the trade from Birmingham.
Yeah.
And as Birmingham makers go, undeniably one of the better ones.
Absolutely. I mean, this has to be one of the better Webley actions they're made on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shame in that, right? It's just,
No,
it's just a box lock. There's not so much you can do with it.
Oh, trigger guard cracked on this one. That's too bad. But it can be, I mean, all right. It can be fixed.
What we're thinking on value as they stand.
You are basically paying for that gun, and then this comes along with, you know, in the bargain.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting
yeah,
it. So, if you were into, let's say, £1,500 for the pair, which is reasonable, what would it cost to bring these back?
Bluing, refinishing of the stock, the crosspins. Crosspins are all right.
Yeah, new pads.
Yeah.
Weld that up.
Yeah.
A mild refinish to the stock of this.
Mild one, because you don't have a lot of material to work on anymore.
But it's always the pain with flat point checkering, right? Is it does fill up significantly easier.
Very fast. Yeah, it does.
So what we're referring to there is, this is flat point checkering. You've got multiple different types of checkering. This is flat point, which means instead of putting V diamonds as the checkering, they literally cut in square parallel lines. It was more of a refined gentleman's thing, a dictation that this is not a workhorse gun. This is a refined gun. Your kind of gun, not my kind of gun.
No, the gentleman's gun, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So reblues nowadays are what, £300 a gun, 350?
Yeah.
Um,
I would say we're looking at somewhere between £1,000 to 1,200. Then they're up to speed. Wouldn't you say so?
so three grand pair.
Yeah.
Does that take it out of contention? Which is always the thing with the sealed bid, right? There are bargains. We've looked at a heap of incredibly nice guns. Get a condition report. I mean, don't do it if it's 50 or 60 pounds.
No.
I mean, that's just a waste of everybody's time. It's going to probably be bad. But for something like this, I think a condition report is actually genuinely intelligent.
Yeah.
Because they do seem relatively good.
I would probably myself stick to around £1,000 for them. If you're going to throw in another grand. So that would be my point.
You're in for 3 grand.
Yeah, £3,000 total.
And that's a very nice, very cool pair of guns. Easy to get blasé about quality vanilla guns.
And I think we should start to look at these semi-short barrels again. Everything has just gone ridiculous with long barrels. What's wrong with 26 or 28 inch barrels? I get at your height, but you know, there's only so many of you.
You say that, right? I had the privilege of being out the other day at Harden Sporting in North Wales. A lovely day in really lovely, flatter to rolling countryside. And he invited a few of us to bring 410s.
Yeah.
And I did try relatively hard to beg, steal or borrow a nice 410. Not many people have demo ones, and those who did, unfortunately, just couldn't get them to me in time. They were out. And so I had to go into my own gun cabinet, and I only own one 410, an AYA number 4, 27.5 inch box lock ejector.
Yeah.
Small.
Cracking gun.
Technically horrible to shoot. You can't shoot stuff with that. I was killing solid 35-yard pheasants with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah. But you're lucky to have an ejector one.
Yes.
They're scarce.
But I relearned how to shoot it.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
So I don't disagree with you, and I speak to a lot of people, I'd love a side-by-side, but it's got to be 30-inch.
Got to be single trigger, got to be 15-inch stock in the original. In this case, if you come across one cheap, could you give me a ring?
In good condition.
In good condition.
Yeah, no,
of course.
They are popular, and popularity drives price.
Yeah.
28-inch guns are incredible. 28-inch side-by-side guns have probably accounted for more dead birds than 32-inch guns.
Absolutely.
I pulled these two guns out on my web search from the sealed bid November catalogue, and both of them appeared on the face of it to be interesting to me. So I grabbed them both and brought them in here for a closer inspection. On closer inspection, they are not as exciting as I thought. So let's start with this. 6210 is a Rottweil Super Sport. Remember the last sale we looked at that Rottweil Paragon? Oh, I should have bought that gun. I did try, I just was a bit too measly with my bid, and the sealed bid works that there's a range, everyone puts a bid in, and whoever puts the highest one in, they're all sealed, nobody knows what the bid is, it's not progressive, whatever you put in, if it's the highest you win. And I clearly wasn't, because I didn't win it. Which is fair, because it was an incredibly cool gun and deserved to be sold for lots of money, and I tried to be tight. after showing people that it was really cool. This is its baby sister, baby brother, whatever it is. It's an Italian built over and under, probably by Sabatti would be my guess. Although Rottweil had their guns built by many people over the years and labeled up Rottweil with various names, and some the same, even with 2 different makers. Coincidence to something we looked at earlier. This one's not bad, but it's I think 80 to 120. It is just an unexciting old 1989 Italian gun. You know, the sort of thing that you'd happily start with, have as your backup gun, have as your wet weather gun, and it's going to be relatively reliable. Other than that, not really worthy of a discussion. Just a cool old shooting stick. Like, what was more interesting is this 6216. This is a Winchester 101 waterfowl, wildfowl. I've heard them called all kinds of things. The gun is actually called a waterfowl, but you know, we call it wildfowl in England, so I think we kind of just gave it its own nickname. This one is a 1980 gun, I believe. It's under £100, and that was intriguing. And I guess I should have looked more closely at the pictures rather than just getting all excited. And it does always bear to look deeper, look at the price, and actually spend a little time before just throwing bids in, because this gun is priced according to its quality. So, back in the late 70s, early 80s, Winchester, making their guns in Japan to a very nice standard, I'm a big fan, as you know, decided that the world needed a waterfowling over and under, more than it did before. Obviously, wildfowling started with side-by-sides, and then autos and pumps really took the day as soon as they became solid. A lot of that was to do with their big chambers and the fact that they were generally a bit cheaper and more rugged for the beating that these sort of guns take. However, these guys came out with this, and they spec'd it for waterfowl. Geese are bigger than partridges, much bigger than clays, so you need a bigger cartridge. They did away with the 2 3/4 inch 70mm chamber and put in a 3-inch Magnum chamber to account for the fact that that was going to be relatively stiff in recoil comparative to a clay load. They made the gun heavier, more meat up the front, less weight taken out of the back, 32-inch heavyweight barrels with Win multi-chokes. They then thought, okay, what do wildfowlers need? They need a dark gun, so they had a black action, black barrels. They then thought, what else do wildfowlers need? They need corrosion resistance. Many people are shooting on salt marshes. Those who aren't are still shooting by water. Water and steel, not friends. So they said, let's make it corrosion resistant. Should we do that all over the gun? They said, no, let's not put it all over the gun. Let's put it on the inside of the barrels. That's a good idea. Chroming on the inside of barrels was not such a dumb thing back in the late 70s and 80s. It was definitely existed, but it was more of a selling point. Even now I speak to old boys who say doesn't throw as good patterns. I mean, we're talking a couple of microns of chrome. I don't think it's the end of the world. What they didn't do, and what this gun has in spades, is corrosion on the outside. Not much water goes up the inside of your barrels. Quite a lot of water and dirt go on the outside of your barrels, on your wood and on your action, and this gun has pitting from start to finish. So what's actually really interesting is, although this gun is rusted all to hell, the chokes come in and out lovely because of that internal chroming. The chokes even are rusted and pitted. The top lever is half rotten away, and yet this gun is still going. That is a testament to one of the reasons I love 101s. It takes a lot of killing. It doesn't take a lot to hurt them, but it takes a lot to kill them. I actually don't know a lot about what happened in the end with this model, whether it was a success or not. But the fact I've seen more than one means it couldn't have been a complete waste of time. I'm trying to decide whether I'm a little bit disappointed or not with this lot. I often big things up in my head before I get to the sealed bid, and some things I play down, and it doesn't always work out right. Lot 6144 is a Simpson Sewell 1988 single trigger trap-ish gun. I was very excited to see it, and I'm very much less excited now I've got it in hand. And yet I still like it, because, well, it's not all bad. What we have here is a 1988 built German, made in GDR over and under. 15 1/4 inch stock with an inch ventilated plate. The stock is not beautiful. not nicely finished. You know, there's that kind of reddish tone you see to guns from that part of the world during that era, and this has got that almost like cuprinol finish. The stock would be nice, but instead of finishing it nicely, there's this weird hook at the end. It's not like a particularly delicious look. The work around the back of the grip there is substandard. The checkering is nice enough for sure, and all these other bits, it's all just a bit smooth and a bit rushed. What is nice, the foreend's a great shape. It's got this step-up rib with the tram line cut down the middle, which is finished really quite poorly at the end. But it's got elements of, so a little bit like the Krieghoff sight plane. Nothing like the Krieghoff, we should point out. But it's kind of familiar and nice, but it's non-tapered. So it's just a huge, wide runway of a rib sat atop a very thin set of bridges. So I take that back. It is somewhat similar to a Krieghoff sight plane. The top lever is ugly and spadey, but to mount and swing, it's all there. 28-inch barrels. And all right, well, let's go into the history and learn maybe why there would be better guns to buy than this, and maybe why there are some worse ones too. We'll see here on the side of the action, Simpson Saul made in GDR. It's a name that doesn't always get the spotlight, but absolutely deserves a place in the history of European gun making. And to really understand why that 88 birth date can be both great and slightly tragic, you've got to know where it came from. Saul, of course, for centuries is the heart of German gun making. A town where almost every family had someone who forged barrels, fired actions, or had some income from the gun trade. That action that we know from so many other gun makers, that deep top, these sort of bolstered sides, is of a more Germanic origin. By the late 1800s, the Simpson brothers were part of the world, rising from steel makers, so they were a part of the trade in making and supplying steel, and they became makers of sporting guns, military rifles, and eventually all sorts of vehicles too. I guess we've seen it from so many other makers, be that in the UK with BSA making guns and bikes and all manner of stuff, to the Spanish guys making typewriters and guns. Like I guess once you're manufacturing one thing that requires refined tools, machining and steel, you might as well be manufacturing anything, right? If you've been to school or lived any other life, you'll understand that the 20th century was not kind to Germany for the most part, post-World War I and leading into World War II, the Nazi regime took the factory. The Simpsons were Jewish, as far as I understand. It became a giant state-owned enterprise. Obviously making vehicles and guns was something that was quite desirable by the state. Then at the end of the war, they banged a line straight down Germany, and Saul found itself on the eastern side of that line, which was less than beneficial. And the story only gets more interesting in that in eastern Germany, more or less, there was a consolidation of gun makers. And so Simpson, Merkel and Haenel all ended up under one roof. And because the whole East German principle of communism was ambitious in theory, but completely lacking in money, there was not a great quality of product that was being produced in that early era. AKA, they weren't good. And you see some nicely finished ones still. There's obviously still artists and artisans, but the guns underneath of that era can be differing. My presumption, like any gun from that part of the world at that time, is they still made fantastic, very, very fantastic guns from the guys in charge, but the majority of the production was bad. I even read a thing once that said that co-op, even right up until the end as Simpson Saul, had a quota of guns they needed to manufacture, and so that there was as much good as they made, they had to just knock some out to be able to meet their government stated quota of guns to produce. Regardless, the whole point is that even though they were made cheaply, they were made robustly. And so anything I said before that pertained to them not being strong was wrong. They are strong. I'm talking about things that just made them less refined. You see some Simpsons that are beautifully carved, beautifully finished with huge attention to detail. This isn't one of those, and yet if you pick it up and feel it and use it, you go, yeah, that's not bad. Whoever put that together and finished it off, they may not have cared a lot, but they cared enough to at least have a gun that didn't feel like a bag and that would continue to run. Suhl in 88 was an interesting place. Germany in 88 was an interesting place, but Suhl in 88 was an interesting place. The GDR was running out of money. It was wobbling socially. There were still gunmakers and craftsmen, right? They were still there. Generally, my understanding is towards the end of the GDR, quality control is hugely varied by comparison to other times. There was a lot more other stuff going on in people's lives, and making quality guns just wasn't a priority. My overall feeling towards this gun is positive. Yes, it's not the sort of quality I was expecting, but it is of a quality that shows that although people may not have cared aesthetically, they still put their time into things that count. It's an era where quiet competence was there, right? They still had that gun-making talent, as I said. Moreover, it's one of the last ever East German Simpsons. After this, the world and economy changed in that part of Germany, probably for the better. I think we can all agree. If you wanted a step-up rib to try, a nice trap gun, a foray into something new, there are way worse places to put your money than this. Plus, 15.25-inch stock. Finally, something for the people over 6 foot. Brings me strange, untold joy. I have a secondary question for you, to be honest, Tim, and it's one that we got a few comments on of the last steel bit video that I'd love to follow on with. Will steel shot kill side-by-sides? You are from a country, Denmark, that doesn't allow lead shot.
Since 1996.
Good year.
Good year. What was it?
I don't know. I was very young. I was having a great time.
Well, I was doing my apprenticeship back then, and I remembered it, and everyone panicked. Like here. Oh no, what are we going to do? We all started shooting bismuth instead. These girls can do bismuth, and you can do with a rather tight choke with bismuth.
It's worry-free.
Exactly. But bismuth, as we know, is quite expensive to use. So we've been playing around with everything for years and years, and we found out it comes down to 3 things. Barrel wall thickness, general condition of the gun, barrel wall thickness.
So barrel wall thickness,
Yeah.
usually, at Holts at least, recommended is above 20 thou.
Yeah.
Does that carry through, or are we looking for an extra bit of meat?
An extra bit of meat is always nice. We are looking for the 23-ish.
Reasonable. I mean,
That's
that doesn't count out many guns, because it's exponential, isn't it, wall thickness?
It is.
It's not
Yeah.
1 thou over is just percentage growth, it's exponential.
It is. But we found out that the barrel wall thickness isn't the crucial point. The choke is. We used to do no tighter than half choke, which we had to alter. So now it is no tighter than a quarter.
I think that's pretty intelligent. Steel doesn't pattern like lead.
No, it
Everything you know has to be cast aside, as you well know.
Yeah. Luckily, many of these old guns are like true cylinder and skeet, or just tiny, tiny choke on the left barrel, which is absolutely fine for steel. Shoot with them. And of course, you have to look at chamber length, because steel is mostly 70mm.
There are some great manufacturers, Holt Cartridge, who produce a traditional steel.
Exactly.
And I think that's good.
That is good.
That's great. But
Because
I-
it might very well shoot all right with normal steel cartridges for a while, but the pressure has to go somewhere, i.e. just rear of the choke or back to the cross pin or the stock or whatever, and you want to, you know, get rid of all that tension in the gun. So let the cartridge or the pellets go out.
Yeah.
They will come out. Just don't put obstacles in their way.
Yeah, cylinder and cylinder throws a fantastic pattern at effective light load steel ranges.
Absolutely. And then always look at maximum bars in the cartridges. You want to look at something 750 tops, stops.
So what we've learnt is, we'll be fine.
Absolutely fine.
That is all for today, guys. We've had a look through some pretty cool lots. I've skipped over all of the more obvious purchases. I think in every video, otherwise we end up with a Beretta or a Browning or a Maruku or a Nikko, and hell, this room is filled with incredibly buyable guns. The sort of thing I love. 80s, 90s and noughties high-end sporters that you can pick up for under £1,000, some of which in lovely condition. Same with the side-by-sides. There are tons of box locks like those Fords, good quality box lock ejectors, probably better condition than those Fords, but they're single guns and ergo less cool. The Webley 700, there's a few of those too. I feel the need to make a film specifically on them. They're becoming chronically underappreciated by people who discard them and just I think they're just a Webley. Guys, let me know in the comments what your favourite was. And well, we'll be back up here in a few months and this place never ceases to amaze. I've got a few bids in mind. I hope you do too. Good luck. We'll see you soon. Thank you for watching TGS Outdoors. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The channel would not be possible without the support of our amazing sponsors who keep videos coming to you week after week. If you really enjoy the channel and want to support it yourself, please consider becoming a member. Channel members get a bit of extra content.
Today we're going to be talking about good shooting advice.
But mostly, you just keep us going, and we love the support. There's a great community goes on behind the scenes. Take care, guys. Goodbye, and we'll see you on the next one.